Appreciate that. Awesome. Well, hello everyone. It's awesome to be back here in Mineola. I think this is like my third or fourth time here, and at this event, I think my second or third time. And I'm here with my brother Matthew as well. He's been here before. It's great to be able to share about all these different topics that are covered here at the Paracon. I know it used to be in Tyler. Who had been here when it was in Tyler? Cool. I think they've rebranded to East Texas Paracon now. A little bit more fitting. George's done a great job of keeping this event going for many years. If you haven't stopped by his shop, definitely go check it out. So thanks to him for all of that. As you can see here, I've got a PowerPoint slide presentation, so I might be walking around a little bit. So if you guys can't see, feel free, I can go back or I can show you later on as well. My name is Daniel Allen Jones. I am interested in all types of the unexplained mysteries, as many of you here are. That's what brings us to events like this, to explore these topics and to find out what we can by working together and learning from each other. This particular topic is going to be about cryptozoology and cryptids, which are the creatures that people encounter in these weird situations that they don't know exactly what kind of animals or what they are. And a good example, probably the most popular example, is Bigfoot, right? How many of you guys have seen any shows or anything like on TV, Bigfoot, right? They had like Finding Bigfoot was a big one, and then Expedition Bigfoot's kind of a more recent show. There are a lot, and there's all kinds of podcasts, and the internet's full of stuff. And you've probably seen this picture of this one plastered all over everything. It's a pop cultural icon at this point. Well, I'm going to share a little bit about those types of things in my talk here. To give you a little bit of background about myself, my involvement. I've been interested in a lot of these things for well over a decade now. I really appreciate history and nature, and those types of things I think help encourage to get out and to explore, whether you're going to find something mysterious or not. It's really good to be able to keep that in mind. It's a very humbling experience. So let me make sure I have this on right. All right. I have a media platform called The Vortex, which is where I share videos, interviews, on-location segments, as well as presentations. This thing might jump around on its own a little bit, so if you see my slides flashing back and forth, I'm going to try to do what I can. So you can go to YouTube, and all my videos, or most of them, are on there. There's many that are still being uploaded, and I share presentations like this one and others from different people on many different topics. You can go to thevortex.wiki and check out even more. And when it comes to the unexplained, I'm fascinated in many of the topics that deal with, like you heard Jay Michael talk about earlier, UFOs. Otherworldly encounters are always fascinating, so I look into those types of reports, as well as cryptids, which are the creatures, like I said, in cryptozoology. Bigfoot's one of them. Parapsychology, you heard earlier, and some of these other things. This is going to be fun, jumping around. And just interesting topics that make us wonder about history as well. I am a musician, so this is my band. We tour all over the galaxy. We have some fun. They dropped me off here this weekend. And big involvement for me was getting involved with all this was really in part due to this guy, Jim Marrs. He was an investigative journalist and an author. Anyone familiar with this guy or read any of his books before? Well, if you haven't, definitely go check him out. He authored several books, and sorry, this is going to be jumping around back there. Basically, he wrote about the Kennedy assassination, he wrote about UFOs, and a lot of other challenging journalistic topics. He also wrote about the Lake Worth Monster. How many of you guys have heard about the Lake Worth Monster? Pretty interesting story of a creature encounter back in 1969, where some people over near where Matthew and I are from, near Fort Worth, that has the story of a scaly goat man, or here, fishy man goat, so people sometimes call it the goat man, that people had seen in that area. Basically, they started getting terrified by it. And it was really something that caught a lot of attention at the time when man was going to the moon. Here in Texas, we were chasing monsters. So this isn't a water monster necessarily, although just the name by association is a lake monster. But the Lake Worth Monster is now well over 50 years old, and people still wonder about it. So Jim wrote for the Star Telegram, the Fort Worth Star Telegram. He wrote articles about the Lake Worth Monster back in 1969. He also wrote about something called the Aurora Spaceman. This has been sort of a specialty focus of mine over the years, and got to bring them both together. But Aurora is northwest of Fort Worth and has a fun story about an airship or UFO crash back in 1897. And the pilot, or alien as some like to think, was buried in the local cemetery. Have any of you guys been to Aurora before or know about the story? So definitely go check it out if you can. There's a historical marker out there. Well, a few years back I got to bring both of those legends together, so that was kind of fun. That's Goatman, and then some people like to say Ned. So I mentioned Aurora has been a focus of mine. I have a project I was working on with Jim originally, and he passed away a few years back, but I kept the project going, and right now it's an online database of all the information about Aurora as far as the legend. I regard it as a legend because it's easier to do historical research when you're looking at it and not in a particular point of view of wanting to believe that it happened or wanting to just think it was only a hoax. So I try to share both or all sides of this folklore, of this legend. And so you can go to auroralegend.com and you can go see all of the different ways that the story has been portrayed in media over the last century. It's probably next to Roswell, been one of the most publicized stories of an otherworldly encounter ever. It's been all over newspapers since the 70s. There's a movie about it. It's been all over the TV, like the History Channel, and it's all over the internet now. I wrote an article for the Roswell Daily Record last year called Science and the Search for Extraterrestrials. It didn't mention the word UFO in it once, but I am fascinated with that because I wanted to stray more toward the credible scientific outlook in this and see where they stand, because it is an important part about how we move forward with the research and how maybe it can be legitimized through work by various organizations like SETI is one of them, and then the Galileo Project. So I have that over at my table, as well as prints of this artwork here that I drew up. It's a very dramatic interpretation or rendering of the Aurora legend. So I have those on my table as well. I also manage a group on Facebook called the Texas UFO Network. If you're interested, you can go there and share about a sighting or find out news information. I also have the Texas Cryptozoology Network, that if you want to learn about other animals or strange creature encounters, or just learn about animal science behavior and fun, weird animal things here in Texas and beyond, you can check that out as well. The title of this talk, on the paper it says Cryptozoology, Bigfoot, and Other Cryptids. This is really an ethnography. So an ethnography is a cultural study, but I also like to tell people, as interesting as the phenomenon of cryptids is, or all of these different things, I'm also equally interested in the communities of people and the culture of people involved with these subjects. So we're going to be talking about that a little bit. So an ethnography, again, a cultural study. Cryptozoology is basically the study of hidden animals. It's something that in recent times has been relegated to pseudoscience, but in reality, it stems from romantic zoology or exotic zoology, speculative zoology. And just so people know, it's cryptozoology. Like if you go to the zoo, you might say zoo, but you probably wouldn't say zoology. You would say zoology. So that's just semantics. It doesn't really matter, but some people often wonder how you say that word. So cryptozoology also incorporates a little bit of the fringe encounters that people describe in the paranormal. In many views, in the classical traditional sense, things like Slender Man, shadow people, black-eyed kids, these things are all interesting, but they're not cryptids in the traditional sense of an unknown animal, right? So it's really important to see that people like Lauren Coleman, who has an International Cryptozoology Museum, has been at this for many, many, many years. And there are a lot of other individuals who have tried to look into strange reports of various creatures and entities and things like this just forever. And thanks to their research and looking into these things, we have a lot to work off of. Now, Bigfoot, it's an interesting idea to think that there's a large, hairy person or creature or something out there running around, right? The term actually originated in the 1958 Humboldt Times with this cast right here by Jerry Crew. And I have the cast, not the original, of course, but a cast of the Jerry Crew finding, which is where the word Bigfoot comes from, over on my table in the other room in the annex, if you want to go check that out, along with another cast of the Great Harbor incident in Washington in 1982. So people wonder, what is the evidence for something like Bigfoot, where there are casts, trackways that are plaster put in to make these tracks. So you're looking at the depression in the ground, not necessarily the foot itself, so it might not always be exact. But some tracks come out really good, and if there are legitimate ones, that's very intriguing. There are definitely fake ones. Just like with all of these areas of the unexplained, there are many hoaxers, charlatans, and people who exploit naivete. We would be naive to think that there aren't people who do that, unfortunately. It should make us hardened and more discerning in our research and investigative work. So people like Bob Gimlin, who was one of two people who went out and saw this picture, or this subject, Patty, as they romantically, sort of affectionately call this creature here. How many of you guys remember that, the video, the Patterson-Gimlin film? Looks like that one, right? So, Bob is not the guy who took the video. That was Roger Patterson. He passed away a few years after that. And basically, he's still around. I've interviewed him. He says that it was a very real creature, that Bigfoot is real, and that what they captured that day was a real person and not a person in a costume. That's what he says. Other people like to say that it was a person in a costume. I don't know. After talking with Bob, he seems very sincere. It would be tough to think that he's lying this whole time, but who knows? I was fortunate to go to the site, to the Patterson-Gimlin film site. It looks much different than it did back over 50 years ago, over half a century ago. People don't realize, I've shared this picture online, and they say, that's not the right place. It's like, you're looking at a picture over half a century old, or a video, this is not going to look the same. It's not, it's mathematically mapped out by a group called the Bluff Creek Project. They know exactly where this took place, despite people on the internet who have no real way to find out that this is what it looks like now. It's a really interesting site, very remote up in Northern California. And people like N.K. Davis have analyzed the film in an attempt to show its legitimacy or not, and I think that's really important. He vouches that it's a real creature. People like Cliff Barrickman, who is one of the main people on finding Bigfoot, he also has a museum, and he finds that this is very compelling, and that the footprint that you can see on, it's hard to kind of notice there, but when this subject is moving, whatever it is, person in a costume or not, at one point, after frame 352, which is like that one, a little bit further on, you can see the back of the foot up like this. And what Cliff has done is shown that the track, because many people don't know that there were tracks cast of this subject or something nearby that fit the same foot that is shown on that frame, that the foot's picked up like that. Other people, like Lauren Coleman, again, have analyzed it, as well as Dr. Jeff Meldrum, who's a professor of anthropology and anatomy, specializing in primate locomotion. So he is one of the few academics that really gives this lends credibility to it and considers it legitimate as well. And other people have done some interesting work. My buddy Joe Taylor, he passed away last year, so rest in peace, but he had a museum where he looked into all kinds of interesting things over in west Texas. And so where is Bigfoot? If there are creatures out there that we call Bigfoot, some people might call other things, it makes us wonder, where are they really staying, hiding, living, existing, all of those things, right? Well, a lot of people think the Pacific Northwest, where we see the original video, but a lot of people consider that there have been many sightings and encounters and reports down here in the south, like in Texas. You have the cult classic, The Legend of Boggy Creek, which actually stemmed a lot of awareness that this is not a specific isolated phenomenon in the Pacific Northwest alone, but also you have the Southern Sasquatch, and you have all these other regional names. You've got the Holly Ham, the Dayton Monkey Man, the Caddo Critter, the Sabine Thing. You have all these really interesting things that are happening, that are being seen. If you say 99% of all of them are bears or misidentified other animals or hoaxes, there definitely seems to be enough consistent reporting to suggest that there is a legitimate phenomenon, at least to me. But I think it's important to remain objective and to look at the information and what the data shows. I'm not a witness to a cryptid. I don't claim to be. I think it's important to steer clear of making sensational claims when there's no substance. But I do listen to people that have things to share. I'm open-minded, but I am skeptical. So I think it's important to see that people often want things to be more exotic than they actually are. Unfortunately, we like things to, we want things to be Bigfoot, and sometimes it is, maybe, and sometimes it's not. As I just mentioned, there's my buddy and colleague Lyle Blackburn, who's probably the biggest promoter at this point of the Boggy Creek beast, the Falcon monster. And so there we are at Boggy Creek. and we're about to do the festival here next week, actually, over in Falk, Arkansas. We had a premiere of the remaster of the movie. Originally came out in 1972. They have a Monster Mart. There's Matthew and I at the Monster Mart statue. Pretty cool. We like to go pretty regularly. There's that festival, some great speakers and contributors to the field right there. And there are other places all around the world where you'll see that there are signs and things indicating that people are familiar with the idea of Bigfoot. Pikes Peak in Colorado has it. The whole rainforest in Washington, all over Washington, there's Bigfoot stuff everywhere. I found him. He was hanging out at a convenience store, so there he is. Even in Texas, there are signs. This is at the Barrow Rest area off of heading down like toward Houston. There's even Bigfoot, Texas, which is funny. There he is. But the thing about the city, Bigfoot, Texas, it has nothing to do with the elusive creature. It's about Bigfoot Wallace, the Texas Ranger, who was named or nicknamed that for having a big foot, I guess, and not actually because of the hairy cryptid. But there are definitely signs of a Bigfoot community. I always like to throw that in there because I think it's kind of funny. There's the mural there in Lake Worth of this really cool anthropomorphic goat man with horns. So that's fun. And they even have a sign that talks about mythological wildlife there at the Fort Worth Nature Center with the Fort Worth City logo on there. And we did a meetup kind of reenacting the idea is that the Lake Worth monster threw a tire at about 30 to 40 party goers who all witnessed it. Again, whether it was someone in a suit or not, it's one of the most highly observed cryptids ever reported. Sometimes you just have the one person say, I saw this, or a few group of people. But imagine like all of us here right now saying we all saw something. That's pretty compelling. There are a few conferences in Southeast Texas. There's the Southeast Texas Bigfoot Conference. I think that's coming back next year. They did a spin-off event called the Bigfoot Roadshow. We actually did one here a few years back, right here on this very stage, which is pretty cool. And then with the Texas Bigfoot Conference, that's going to be in Jefferson later in October. Jefferson has been declared the Bigfoot capital of Texas. There's Jeff. And not only that, but it's also been declared a safe haven for Bigfoot, officially. This isn't just like a fun tabloid headline. This has like been official declaration or proclamation by the mayor and city council members there. Whether you believe in Bigfoot or not, or whether you think it's a matter of belief or not, is kind of irrelevant because this obviously drives in a lot of interest in tourism. So there are a lot of factors at play when it comes to something like this. They also did the Bigfoot Film Festival over in Marshall. Don't know we're going to do that one anymore. And then Southeast Oklahoma is a huge Bigfoot center as well. Have you guys ever been down to like Hochatown or Gasquatch? Gasquatch is a huge gas station that's all Sasquatch themed. And in Hochatown, there's Bigfoot everywhere. Over in Oklahoma, they actually have a bounty for Bigfoot as well. It's like $3 million or something, alive. They're not encouraging anyone to go kill Bigfoot. But that's a thing that was to also promote tourism and to go get your hunting license and things like that. It's huge in pop culture. I do running events. There's this whole thing called the Bigfoot Running Company, and they make all these super cool medals, Bigfoot medals and things, and you can do like a mile, you can do a 5K, a 10K, whatever. And there's just Bigfoot plastered. That frame 352 is plastered all over everything. Of course, jack links, beef jerky. But it makes us wonder, are there different types of Bigfoot creatures? Are these actually like different types of creatures, or are we seeing like regional variations? So when this happens in other animals, conventionally this is called speciation. When you have all these different types of creatures that are like, this type of cat or this type of dog, that's the breeding, the interbreeding between animals, the speciation is really important to know that like, the genetic makeup changes depending on different creatures. So if you have all dogs being dogs, but you have like this type of dog and that type of dog, that's something people wonder about. Do we have different types of Bigfoot? Is the Yeti really white? Or is it just covered in snow and misinterpreted as being white? There are a lot of factors into the minimal amount of time that people have sometimes describing their encounters. And people consider what's the reality behind Bigfoot foot morphology, meaning how does what we see in the ground of those footprints match up to what's actually going on with real foot morphology. And for those who are in the camp of what some call the apers, whereas Bigfoot is an ape, like a flesh and blood primate, not a ghostly, phantom, interdimensional, portal jumping alien. And that sounds amazing, but that's extremely difficult to really ascertain. Whereas like a flesh and blood creature would probably be a little bit easier. This is a baboon named Darby. Matthew and I were just over there in West Texas. It's funny. We were at the West Tex Paracon last weekend, literally, and now we're at the East Tex Paracon. They have a baboon named Darby who grew up on a couch watching TV with a lady, never knew the wild, never knew other animals, and so they acquired that baboon, and he has a pretty good life now and lives in this enclosure. And you can shake his hand, you can feed him fruit and bananas and stuff. That's his foot. It's very long and has little toes. And so people wonder, what is the biology of these creatures? Did they have similar morphology or anatomy to us? Their physiology might be similar, or is there something totally different? Why are we seeing humanoid-shaped creatures that aren't supposed to exist? Well, if we look back in the fossil record and all these other things, recent findings, we're finding like all these other types of human types, Homo habilis, Homo erectus, Neanderthal, Denisovans. Homo and Homo sapiens means human. So people often don't realize that there were many humans. There were many types of humans. And the speciation of our legacy alters with being assimilated into other genetic groups. That's why we have some people who have Neanderthal DNA, is because we assimilated with them, and now there are no more that we know of. And the same thing could be with other types of human people, whether they're Homo sapiens or not. People like Ron Moorhead have often said that they're very intelligent and they are able to perform abilities. But he captured what is called the Sierra Sounds back in the 70s in Washington, which has a weird chattering, some people call it the samurai chatter. The Sierra Sounds have been highly contested, but it's some of the most, you would say, like criticized vocalizations of what people interpret as Bigfoot. There's a ton of literature out there. My buddy Steven Strupert had a bookstore. It unfortunately burned down. But there's a ton of information about Bigfoot, Sasquatch, hominids, phantom hairy man reports, all these different things. And Dan Nedrello has a website dedicated to it called Wild Man Literature. If you want to check it out, people post on there. There's all kinds of things in social media. There's these people here, Wes Germer and Tony Merkel, they have podcasts. The Sasquatch Chronicles is probably the biggest Bigfoot podcast out there. They share about reports, stories from all over. The problem is that there's stories, and there's really no way to corroborate them unless there's like hard data and evidence. So if you just like fun stories and you want to get spooked at night, check out some of these podcasts. But maybe there's something to them. It's really hard to say with a lot of it. Like Finding Bigfoot, if they found it, they'd be done with like episode 1 and that would be it. But you have to keep your show going. You want to get signed for another season. They ended up doing like 100 episodes, which is really interesting because it helps to get Bigfoot out into public awareness. And there's a lot of help that can do, and there's a lot of harm it can do as well. Because obviously, in my view, I don't think it's cool that people might want to go run out and gun them down, but some people might think that that's awesome and want to go like have a taxidermy Bigfoot up in their mansion or something. So Bobo and Cliff, those guys, and there's some other people, I got to interview them about what they think of how utilizing a public platform like network television can help to generate social awareness when it comes to things like cryptozoology or just naturalism in general, and actually helping to kind of get people outdoors and explore nature and encourage sort of open-mindedness about the possibility that Bigfoot or other cryptids might exist. People like Adam Davis from the UK, he's a world explorer. He's been all over searching for not just Bigfoot, but he went to the Himalayas in search of the Yeti. He went to Mongolia in search of the death worm. He's been to the Congo in search of Mokele mbembe, a supposed living fossil dinosaur. And all of these other really interesting things as well. And there are many different cryptids. Bigfoot is just probably the most popular, well-known. There's Russ from Expedition Bigfoot, along with Maria Mayer. I interviewed her last year, again asking her about the importance of conservancy and also how utilizing her show as a way to be a science communicator can play a role into encouraging young minds and getting people outdoors. So it's important to see that whether they find Bigfoot or not, it's opening up people to the possibility that it could exist, or that we should at least be open to getting outdoors more and exploring nature. By the way, we didn't this time, but I've stayed. How many of you guys have been to the nature preserve, like right over here? If you haven't, if you're nearby, if you're ever gonna go check it out, go to the nature preserve. It's a beautiful place. I camped there. We stayed there, I think, last year for 3 days, and they actually have a Bigfoot. What do they call it? It's like a Bigfoot river or something down there. It's on the map. It's pretty cool. Whether Bigfoot or not is there or not, that's a question for James Pogue. I don't know if he's around, but he's got a roundtable discussion panel I think we're going to do later on. But he's here in the area, and he's been out there probably more than anybody. And I think that if there was Bigfoot out there, he would know. I've talked again with Dr. Meldrum about the role of science and anthropology when it comes to Sasquatch and Bigfoot, and he does think that there is something legitimate to it. And I think that it's important to be curious, but also to be level-headed. If you're not someone who's had a sighting of a cryptid, it's easy to say, well, I won't believe it until I see it. But there are people who not only have said that and then ended up seeing one, and their whole life is turned around. Some people get involved with this topic inadvertently, not because they wanted to, but because they had a sighting. Yeah. So it's really important to see that there are serious scientists who are trying to figure this stuff out at an academic level. And again, Texas has all of these different things going on. Dr. Jeff Meldrum is going to be back at the Texas Bigfoot Conference in October. So what is Bigfoot? Here are some proposed explanations or theories. Now, these are not my own, simply because I would not be as arrogant to try to espouse ideas that I don't really know about, but these are based upon my interactions with all the people I've discussed this with who have either seen one or have studied this for decades. The ideas are either it's a hoax altogether, or it's a person in a suit. That definitely does happen. I don't think it accounts for all of it. Misidentified bears, usually, or misidentified known animals. So, like, misidentification does play a role in a lot of things, especially things like UFOs also. But could it be an undiscovered primate species? Some people think it's a human-ape hybrid. And then we get a little bit more exotic with interdimensional beings, extraterrestrials. Some people think that they're the Nephilim of the Bible, or that they're demons, or mind projections, or nature manifestations. That's all interesting. I don't think it's a single one of those. I think that all of those are valid until we have something more to work with. And that should be said with any of this. Paranormal, UFOs, anything. It's all very speculative, and it lets our minds run wild, and that can be fun, but it also is a double-edged sword because people make sensational claims about something with very little facts or basis of knowledge that can be established using corroboration and evidence. So stories are stories until they're not. In my view, until you can prove something that is substantial, we can at least hear someone out, be open to the possibility. Until there's more to work with, it's not really going to move anything forward. People often wonder about giants. Do or have giants ever existed, or do they still exist? So it makes us wonder kind of what are the possible ideas behind that. I mean, we find a lot of elongated skulls. People wonder, were those a different type of human or human-like entity? There's this weird thing in Arizona. They found it in a cave, and it had been displayed in the gas station for a long time until they redid the whole exhibit. And has anyone here ever seen The Thing in Arizona? There are like signs on the highway, I think 10, for miles that say The Thing, just like that. And you go in and have a whole exhibit. Now they've made it up into a dinosaurs versus aliens exhibit. And it's really important to see that, this is a fun story, and they are showing something. It could be a paper mache body, but they're saying that this was a creature found in a cave, and it's hard to see, but there's a little, it's coddling like a little one. So some people think that this could have been like an alien body. And I think this is relevant right now because of all the buzz in the news and the sensationalism about the mystery mummies from South America. How many of you guys have been keeping up with this whole thing? The Mexican Congress, the Jaime Maussan talking about the mummies found in South America and Peru. Anyway, it's a big thing on the news right now. So much so that the Ministry of Culture actually tried to go and confiscate these bodies from a conference that they were having. Because it's a huge ethical dilemma. These are grave robbers, essentially, if you put it bluntly, who find that whatever they've uncovered is important enough to share with the world, sure, we can understand that. However, if they're not alien at all, or not even anything mysterious, and they're just people, then we're dealing with people who have just like basically dug up old ancient graves and are parading them around as something that they're not. And that's actually kind of an eye-opening thought, if that's actually really happening. Sorry this is jumping around so much. So the Atacama skeleton was a little skeleton that was found in the Atacama Desert in Nazca, Peru. This is not the real thing. I would not hold the real one up. Actually, someone did, and they broke its arm. This is a cast mold. Looks pretty cool as an item, but the real one is mysterious. They thought maybe it could be extraterrestrial, but it was found to be in no way an alien at all. So it makes us wonder, what the reality is to it. There was this thing called the Star Child skull. Same thing. It was found in Mexico in a cave, dated about 900 years old. Someone named Lloyd Pye went around saying it could be an alien or an alien hybrid. Some osteological testing was done to show that the nuclear or father's DNA was Mesoamerican, and the maternal DNA was Native American, and it also was in no way extraterrestrial. And so this item was given back to Mexico, probably as it should have been. And so it's important to see, sometimes we glean medical information and we learn things, even though sometimes things are paraded around as alien artifacts when they're really not. There's Joe Taylor and Melanie Young, who owned it, along with Chase Klutsky, who they were doing studies on it. And again, like I said, mystery mummies. This guy, Jaime Maussan, has been talking about those things for years, a long time now, but it's actually been a big news thing. So if you want to do a quick search on mummies, or like mystery mummies, you'll see this all over the news with this guy here. And maybe there is something to the mummies, but a lot of the things I've looked into basically said they're not legitimate, and they're being used as sort of propaganda. The thing, though, is that either way, it's generating discussion. It's opening up a dialogue about the possibility of non-humans. And that's a real eye-opener as well, to think that, wow, maybe at some point, or even now, there could be other people here amongst us in the same world that we live in together. That's fascinating. And then the idea about dinosaurs, relict dinosaurs, not relic, but relict with a T. The difference may just be semantics, but the idea is that a relict is something from a bygone era that has survived, whereas a relic might be the remains of a person that has been held onto and associated with, in some way, artifacts or some significance. I was fortunate enough to go out to Glen Rose, to Dinosaur Valley State Park. How many of you guys have been down to the Dinosaur State Park? Definitely go check it out. Probably, if you can bear the heat, the Texas heat gets intense, but if you can go in late July or August, Biloxi River dries up, and you can see these theropod tracks. These are an Acrocanthosaurus dinosaur, a little bit like a T-Rex. It's a bipedal dinosaur. And they also have Sauroposeidon, which is a sauropod dinosaur, it's like a brontosaurus-looking one, very tall. The four-legged ones with long tail, long neck. This is one of the longest trackways in the world. It's over in Glen Rose at Dinosaur State Park. But you can't see this normally. If you go anytime when the water's there, you can kind of see under the water a little bit, but you can't just go walk out right there. So when there's drought, the river dries up, the water reveals a very significant trackway that people thought was a new discovery, but this happens every several years, and people forget that people have discovered this time and time again. It's rediscovered. I went down there with a few people to help do some counting, and there's over 100 consecutive tracks. And there's a little bit of a break up in some areas, but they found over 100 contiguous tracks. The Burdick track is controversial. Some people, depending on what your disposition is, if you're a creationist, you might think it's recent, or if you're not and you think it's legitimate, you might consider it's millions of years old. Or if you are skeptical of either of those, you might consider it was recently made by modern people in modern times. The Burdick track is found also in Glen Rose, similarly to the things like the fossil finger and the Alvis Delp track, which show that theropod three-toed track alongside a human-shaped footprint. This is what I think fuels the idea that humans and dinosaurs live together in the view of creationism. For some people, I'm not trying to blanket statement all creationists, I'm not trying to make it like that, but I'm only saying this because this information was provided by me provided to me by the Creationist Science Museum right next to the Dinosaur State Park from the people who investigated this. So if this is fake, it's a very clever fake, and interesting that the trackway continues under the limestone. There are also the Ica stones from Ica, Peru, which depict dinosaurs with human people together. If there are any real ones, which many of them are not real, if there are any, it suggests that there could be a link between these creatures living together with people at some point in the past. That's interesting. And maybe that there could be some still around. There's Adam Davis again and John Kirk, who have both been to the Congo in search of Mokele Mbembe, thought to be possibly a sauropod dinosaur still living. And that's very interesting. It could be something else. It could be totally mistaken. But this is where you have the subject of ethnozoology come into play, where the people of a given area or culture are familiar with the wildlife of their own environment, but foreigners who are coming in aren't. So we, as Westerners, arrogantly think that we know everything, and then when we go to other places, we assume that we should know what they already have, but when they tell us, the ethnic group associated with the region know what's in the area, and they tell us something, and people have shown these, the Congolese there, pictures of lions, bears, a brontosaurus, and they say, oh yeah, that one right there, that's Mokele Mbembe, for sure. That's really interesting to think. These people don't know sometimes, and maybe some of them do, but it's interesting to consider that these people wouldn't otherwise know much about some of these other animals. So when they're saying that, yes, this one is Mokele Mbembe, that makes us wonder, is there really any legitimacy to that? Are they saying that to bring in people to, work together, strike deals? Who knows? But these guys have been there in search of it. It's a jungle, and they both would say they would never go back and do it again. Are there possibly avian cryptids or creatures in the air? Some people think that the thunderbird might be a real animal, as described by the natives, or in the Rio Grande Valley. Talked to many people who said they saw the big bird. It was a huge rash of sightings down in the Rio Grande Valley, down in South Texas, Raymondville, Brownsville. In the 70s, they described seeing a pterosaur, or a pteranodon, or a pterodactyl. Or was it mistaken? Was this another case of misidentification? Possibly, but you have a lot of people describing that. When it comes to felid cryptids, or cats, a lot of people talk about the big cats, the mystery cats. A lot of people describe seeing black panthers or black jaguars and things here which are said not to be here, not to exist, despite many of the reports suggesting that they are. That's actually just a domestic cat that was out in a field. And this is a good example. People posted, I took this picture knowing what it was, but people post stuff like this all the time without scale and say, that was a huge black cat. That thing was massive, the size of this couch. But in reality, it was smaller than this table up here. But because there's no way to gauge scale, anything can pass on the internet, and people, of course, would want something like this to be a giant black cat. Or not. They would want to go gun it down and protect their livestock or something, or their family. So black cats are a big, interesting phenomenon that is reported as existing here in the state of Texas as well. People often ask about the chupacabra, and I'll say that I threw this in here because I think it's important. It's a little bit part of the urban legend lore and sort of folklore of Latin America as well. The El Chupacabras of Puerto Rico is not the same chupacabra as we have here in Texas. We're talking about a bipedal spined, bulbous head, reptilian type creature in Puerto Rico, and we're talking about a canid dog-like creature here in Texas. They actually call it the blue dog, and oftentimes it's actually just a coyote with mange, and that's been genetically determined multiple times. So the chupacabra word has been used as an umbrella term to describe any type of creature that has this condition. It cannot be passed down. It is unfortunately a singular creature that suffers from this condition and cannot give birth to another one like it. It's just something that it unfortunately occurred along its life. And so there's a few. There's the Chupacabra Cantina, there's the Chupacabra Kitchen. You can go to some of these places in sort of in Austin, Texas. There's a taxidermy one. This was a real animal. It had been kind of modified a little bit with some fun things to make it more dramatic, but this is a canid, or a dog. type creature, basically that suffered a condition like mange, and they become erratic. So you have to be careful about some of those types of animals that you see like this, because it's not just a new species of unexplained animal, but the ways we interpret it might seem very strange. So we just have to look at some of the reports out there. But speaking of dog-type creatures, people now, more than ever, I think, are really interested in this whole dogman phenomenon. It's swept the internet. There are a lot of people who are interested in this. We had a conference, the Dogman Conference. There's a guy, Josh Turner, who hosts a radio show podcast called the Paranormal Roundtable. You guys ever heard of that or listened to it? He covers all kinds of interesting stories, but again, they are stories. It's hard to track down any corroborating evidence to support these types of claims, but they make for fun stories. But people are very seriously into dogman. They would say that dogman is like a werewolf, but a werewolf is someone who changes into a werewolf, whereas dogman is dog all the time. I don't know how that works. I don't think there's really any strong support to show that dogman exists other than people's claims of their encounters with one, where they describe it was a large creature, menacing and hairy like Bigfoot, but not Bigfoot, had dog-like head, very specifically. And some people say, well, no, you're just mistaking Bigfoot. You're seeing these weird horns or ears, and you're thinking that it's a dog or a snout or something. So there's a lot of speculation about dogman and division in the community of people into this, whether there's any reality to it or not. And of course, people talk about skinwalkers. This term gets thrown around. There's a show, obviously, Skinwalker Ranch. This is a Navajo concept. These are Navajo Rangers, John and Stan, and they've been on shows, talk with them, and they show how the idea of the skinwalker gets misassociated so much. Basically, the idea is that you have, it's like black magic witchcraft, where a person utilizes that, and along with an article of some kind of organic specimen from an animal, they can use that to shapeshift into one. So it makes us wonder, this is a little bit outside, this is on the fringes of cryptozoology. It's not a traditional concept, but people are interested in the paranormal, supernatural, the myth and the folklore of these issues, so it gets blended in. Same thing with Mothman. It's kind of a paranormal, a UFO, and cryptid all at once, because you have all of these different stories that people see in what initially was called the bird, not a moth in any way. And this is extremely exaggeration for the statues. Cool statue. They have a huge Mothman festival every year. It's enormous, but the statue is awesome too. But they never describe something like this: a moth humanoid, an anthropomorphic moth human. It's not that this is something that they're trying to make people believe. It's just an iconic depiction that stands out. What about aquatic cryptids? Over here at Lake of the Pines, there are many stories all over, but Lake of the Pines, they have a giant catfish. So sometimes it's more so dealing with creatures that are like disproportionately large, like larger than life. Like someone saw a catfish the size of a Volkswagen or something once. And this Lake of the Pines has one of those stories, and many lakes around do. Actually, just so if you didn't know, Texas only has like one or two natural lakes. Almost every other lake in Texas is man-made. There's this funny idea of the Oklahoma octopus at Lake Thunderbird that was featured on like the Lost Tapes in the 90s. That's the only origin of that story, and it just goes to show that fun stories make for great television, and there's nothing really more to it than that. But the idea that an octopus could be found in a lake doesn't really hold much water, and I think that it's something that sounds weird and creepy and would be for sure, but you put an octopus in this lake, it's not going to survive for more than probably a few hours at the most. And then this kind of brings me to a little bit more of a recent investigation that I was involved with about giant salamanders. So how many of you guys have seen the giant salamanders in China or in Japan? Enormous, like 5 to 6 foot long salamanders. These are real animals. They don't have special abilities or anything like that. They're just very big compared to like axolotls and small newts and other salamanders. Well, alongside a lot of the original Bigfoot reports in the 60s over in Northern California, some of the journals of these researchers and investigators actually talked about describing water dogs, extremely large and disproportionately large giant salamanders there in the Pacific Northwest, in the Trinity Shasta National Forest, and in other places. Well, we went to the same sites as many of these. We launched an investigation with my colleagues. There's Jason Kantz and Ken Gerhardt. He led the group. He's a world-renowned cryptozoologist, and it was very cool, and I'm honored to be able to have worked with him on this. I documented the whole trip. I've been working on piecing together a bit of a documentary. There we all are, Jason Kantz, myself, Ken Gerhardt, Jamie Wayne, and Jim right there, Jim Whitehead. So we went out there 3 years ago, almost 3 years ago. We were featured in this Bigfoot Quest magazine. We went to Bluff Creek. We were featured in this Bluff Creek documentary. And while we didn't find any giant salamanders, spoiler alert, we did find what are actually called Pacific giant salamanders. That is their actual name. They are real. They don't grow to like 4 to 6 feet or 8 feet long like some of these old reports, but they do grow about 2 feet long. How many of you guys have heard of or have seen the hellbenders salamanders like in Oklahoma? Those actually can get pretty big. Those are like maybe 18 inches, but they're not like able to sit on this whole couch big, like some of these stories espouse. So we were actually fortunate. I was able to find, there's this really small one here. You can see this is a very small aquatic. When they're maturing, they grow out and are no longer aquatic, they become terrestrial. When they grow large, they get up on land and they stay there. But we did find a pretty good, like about a foot long sized salamander of the Pacific giant salamanders, which is great that we found something. It's not the one we were looking for, but it just shows that there are salamanders out there. Now, could this be a thing where you have an issue of forced perspective? If I say forced perspective, who knows what I'm talking about? So it's like when you hold, like if you go fishing, and you hold up your catch up to the camera, and you hold up your catch as close as you can to the lens so it looks larger than it actually is. That's called forced perspective. So maybe sometimes there were issues where people were seeing things and they were exaggerating of how large they actually were, and then unfortunately this turned into a story where it was like, oh yeah, they had salamanders that were like 6 or 8 feet long out there, when maybe they were only 2 feet long and they were the Pacific giants. Who knows? But we had a great time. Again, it was an amazing journey out there in the Trinity Shasta National Forest and in Bluff Creek. And it goes to show that we really wanted to encourage people to get out there, to really see what they could not just find for themselves, but what they could do to enjoy and appreciate nature. So when it comes to cryptozoology, I want to share some of these things here that we just talked about. Some of the things there, the cultural outlook on proposed theories and explanations, same thing. Many hoaxes, unfortunately. There are misidentified known species, like we were just saying. Undiscovered species and hidden animals, I think, is a real legitimate part of our world that we exist within all these other animals that are a part of. And I think it's important. We're finding new species every day. Entomology, marine wildlife, down in the ocean. Sometimes we do find mammals and large mammals. Prehistoric, supposedly extinct Lazarus species, they can come back. We're looking at cloning things. It's really interesting to consider the technical and scientific possibilities now. And then again, ethnozoological implications that were native knowledge of animals that aren't known to the Western world. Or can mutation play a role? Are we seeing animals that have been mutated and in some way this plays a role in our interpretation of them and some of our superstitions throughout the world and culture? So with that being said, to kind of give you a summation, it's really important to consider that there's a lot that goes into this field of study of cryptozoology. As a root study being zoology, I think it's really important to emphasize to look into animal science and behavior. And so with that, other than some of the sensational things and the fun shows, there are some great benefits, but there are possibilities of promoting two sides of the same coin, perhaps. So you have scientific challenges, media sensationalism, of course, that's going to happen. Pop culture and commercialization. You look at all the items that Bigfoot's been thrown on, or the chupacabra or anything, right? So that's really popular. It can also promote critical thinking and open-mindedness. It can promote interest in zoology, animal behavior, and science. It promotes social awareness, but also nature exploration and the outdoors, and being compassionate toward wildlife. I think that's one of the best things it can promote. Whereas the other end would be it promotes sensationalism, so we have to be careful and use discernment. But also it helps us to seek a deeper understanding about the world that we share with creatures and with each other. So it's really important. We look at this objectively sometimes, and we're open-minded about the possibilities that there are still things to be discovered, and that the process of discovery to declaration is not always instantaneous. That sometimes when people discover things, it's not immediately known to the world, and we have to see about how it goes from the discovery to declaration, and if it's done scientifically, or if it's just done in a way that's made viral and for views or whatever. So there are a lot of factors that go into it. However, we're making new discoveries every day, and like I said, if you watch any of my videos on the vortex, you'll know I say we won't know if we don't go, and I want to commend all of you for being here. Here we are, we've gone, we're connecting, we're getting together to explore these ideas, to see what we can do, to work together and find out what's next. So I'll see you guys in the vortex. Thank you for your time. I know there's another talk going on like at 3, so if anyone has any questions, feel free to let me know. Otherwise, I will be going to the annex. I've got a table.